Prepping for this deep dive got me thinking about something kind of weird. Like, we all know water's important, right? We drink it, cook with it, splash around in it. But I never really stopped to think about just how much of our bodies are actually made of water.
Right. It's easy to forget about until you're really thirsty.
Exactly. Out of sight, out of mind. But then I saw these stats, and whoa, turns out we're basically walking, talking water fountains.
It's true. The average person is like, what, 55 to 60% water? It's wild. And get this, babies are born practically little water balloons at nearly 75%.
75%.
Yep.
Seriously. I mean, it makes sense when you think about how vital water is for, well, everything, but still, that's a lot of H2O.
It really highlights how we often take water for granted. We only really think about it when we're thirsty, but it's doing so much more for us than just quenching our thirst.
Okay, so big picture then. Why is water so important? Like, at a fundamental level, what's it doing in there?
On a really basic level, our cells, our organs, everything needs water to function.
Yeah.
It's involved in a ton of crucial bodily processes.
Okay, so can you give us an example?
Well, like, our sources for this deep dive talk about how water acts as a cushion for our joints. It's not just about stopping your bones from grinding together, though that's important too. Water helps make the stuff called synovial fluid, and that's what lets our joints move smoothly without pain.
Huh. Nature's WD-40. I like it. So it's lubrication, basically.
Pretty much. And that's just one thing. What about temperature regulation? Ever wonder how our bodies stay at that nice, even 98.6 degrees?
I mean, I kind of just assumed my body just
Yeah.
did it. Never questioned the magic, I guess.
Right, but it is kind of magical when you break it down. Think of your body like a car engine. It needs coolant to keep from overheating. And guess what? That's water too. It helps spread heat evenly throughout your body and stops those uncomfortable temperature spikes, especially when it's hot out or you're working out.
So water keeps us running smoothly, literally. Now, what about our brains? Don't those need a lot of water too?
Absolutely. Our brains are like 73% water, and even being a little dehydrated can mess with how well our brains work. It's like trying to run your computer on low battery. Things just start lagging. You might have trouble concentrating, get that foggy-headed feeling, even get headaches if you're not drinking enough water.
Oh, seriously. Makes those stay hydrated messages seem way more urgent now. So we've covered joints, temperature, brains. What else does water do for us that we might not realize?
Well, we've got to mention the whole flushing out toxins thing, right? Water is key for our kidneys to filter waste products and get rid of them when we pee.
Okay, so that's how we get rid of water, but how much are we supposed to be taking in? Is that whole 8 glasses a day thing legit?
That's actually a myth. Well-intentioned, but still a myth. Everyone's different. How much water you need depends on a whole bunch of stuff. How active you are, the climate you live in, your overall health.
So how are we supposed to know how much to drink?
The good news is your body is pretty good at telling you. Paying attention to your thirst is key. Feeling thirsty, drink something. But you can also watch out for other signs of dehydration, like that fatigue we were talking about, headaches, or even if your pee is darker than usual.
That's interesting, because I always figured being tired was just part of life. Never really considered it could be from not drinking enough water.
Oh, it definitely can be. And hey, it's not all about chugging plain water either. Lots of fruits and veggies are loaded with water. Think watermelon, cucumbers, even strawberries. They're like nature's juicy snacks.
Okay, that's a great point. So many ways to get our H2O in. What about coffee and tea? Do those count?
That's a tricky one. They do have water, but they're also diuretics, meaning they can actually make you lose more fluids.
So it's kind of a wash.
Sort of.
Hmm.
Moderate amounts of coffee or tea shouldn't be a problem, especially if you're balancing them out with plenty of water throughout the day.
It's all about that balance, huh? Kind of like with so many things in life. Speaking of balance, this conversation's got me thinking about our mental health too, which segues perfectly into our next topic. So we were just talking about balance, right? And it kind of makes me think we need that balance with our mental health just as much as we do with our physical health. And this deep dive is covering both. Alongside all this fascinating stuff about water, our sources also went deep on depression, and wow, it really drives home how connected our minds and bodies truly are.
It's so true. We often separate the two, but they're in constant communication, influencing each other in ways we don't even realize. And you're right, depression is a topic that deserves our attention. I mean, it's a global health concern. One of the sources even mentioned it's a leading cause of disability worldwide.
Seriously,
Yeah.
that's huge. It's not something to be taken lightly, that's for sure. And I think it's important to really understand what depression is, and maybe even more importantly, what it isn't. Because we all have down days, right?
Absolutely. Sadness is a normal human emotion. Everyone experiences it from time to time. Could be a bad day at work, a fight with your partner, or even just crummy weather getting you down. Those feelings, though, they usually pass. Clinical depression, though, that's a whole different ballgame. It's much deeper and lasts a lot longer.
So how do you know the difference?
Yeah.
Like, how can someone tell if they're just having a rough week or if it's actually depression they're dealing with?
That's such a good question. One of the sources described it like this. Clinical depression means you're feeling down or you've lost interest in things you used to love, and it's been going on for at least 2 weeks straight. And here's the important part. These feelings are so intense that they start messing with your everyday life.
So it's not just about feeling sad. It's about that sadness impacting your work, your relationships, just your ability to get through the day-to-day.
Exactly. It can show up in so many different ways, too. Our sources mention things like changes in your appetite, like you're either eating a ton or hardly eating at all.
Yeah.
Or your sleep is all out of whack, you can't seem to fall asleep. Or you're sleeping way too much.
And even if you are sleeping, you're still wiped out.
Right. That overwhelming fatigue, even when you are getting enough rest, is another big one.
Wow, it's crazy how all these things can be tied to depression. I think it really highlights that it's way more than just a bad mood.
Oh, for sure. And we haven't even gotten into the physical changes that happen in the brain when someone is depressed.
Okay, now we're getting into some serious science here. Can you break it down for those of us who don't have a PhD in neuroscience? Like, what's actually going on up there?
Basically, our brains rely on these chemicals called neurotransmitters, right? They're like messengers that send signals between brain cells. And there are a few key players, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, that are super important for regulating our mood. Well, with depression, the activity and balance of these neurotransmitters gets all messed up.
So it's like a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's not all just like in their head. It's a real physical thing. But if scientists know all this, why is it so hard to figure out what causes depression in the first place?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Even with all the research, there's no single answer. It seems to be this perfect storm of genetics, your life experiences, environmental factors.
So if someone's listening to this and they're like, wait a minute, this sounds scarily familiar
Yeah.
with so many possible factors, how are they supposed to know for sure if it is depression?
You bring up a really important point because the symptoms are so different for everyone, and a lot of times people keep it to themselves. It can be really isolating. People can suffer in silence for years, feeling totally lost and alone, without realizing there are actually treatments out there that could help.
That's heartbreaking, but also encouraging in a way. Just knowing that they're not alone and that there are ways to feel better can be a huge relief in itself. But before we dive into the whole treatment side of things, what would you say to someone listening who's relating to all of this? Like, what's the very first step they can take to get help?
Honestly, just recognizing that you're struggling and that it's okay to ask for support is a huge step. I think a good place to start is often talking to your doctor.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They can listen to what you're going through, assess your symptoms, and if needed, they can connect you with a mental health professional who can provide a proper diagnosis and talk about treatment options.
That's good advice. But I imagine for a lot of people, even just that first step of talking to their doctor can feel pretty overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. It's a big deal. But it's so important to remember. Reaching out for help is not weak. It's incredibly strong. You're taking charge of your well-being, and that's amazing. Even that initial step of picking up the phone to call your doctor or a therapist, it can make a world of difference.
So there really is hope for people struggling with depression.
Absolutely. So much hope. And, the sources we looked at for this deep dive, they really highlight how many different treatment options are out there. And a lot of times it's about combining a few different approaches for maximum effectiveness. Like one of the most common combos is medication and therapy.
Okay, so it's not like you have to choose one or the other.
Not at all. It's a two-pronged attack. Think about it this way. Antidepressant meds, they can help correct those chemical imbalances we talked about earlier, the ones messing with your serotonin and dopamine levels.
So the meds, they sort of get those brain chemicals back in balance.
Exactly. It's like giving your brain a little boost to help it function the way it should. But medication alone, it can't fix everything. There are often thought patterns, behaviors, maybe unhealthy coping mechanisms that also contribute to depression.
That's where therapy comes in, right?
Exactly. Therapy gives you this safe, supportive space to really dive into those thoughts and feelings that are causing you trouble. You can start to challenge those negative thought patterns and come up with healthier ways to cope with things.
So it's like learning a new set of tools to help you navigate those tough emotions.
Exactly. And when you combine those new tools with medication that's helping your brain function at its best, that's when you can see some really amazing progress.
It sounds like medication and therapy can be a really powerful combination. Now, what about those other therapies I've heard about, like ECT and TMS? Are those common treatments for depression too?
Those are definitely options, but they're not usually the first line of treatment. They're more for folks who haven't had success with medication and therapy or for more severe cases of depression.
So it's all about finding what works for each person. Right.
Oh,
Like, no two brains are the same, so no two treatment plans should be the same either.
you got it. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, and it might take some time to figure out what combination works best. But don't give up. There is always hope, and there are so many qualified people ready to help you find your way back to feeling like yourself again.
That's so important to remember. Don't give up. There is help out there.
Absolutely. And don't forget about the power of those simple lifestyle changes, too. We're talking regular exercise, even if it's just a quick walk around the block, eating a balanced diet packed with those brain-boosting nutrients, and of course, prioritizing those Z's, getting enough sleep is essential.
So once again, it all comes back to taking care of ourselves holistically, right? Mind, body, the whole package.
Couldn't agree more. And, even incorporating small positive changes can make a world of difference in how you feel. Spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones, practicing mindfulness. These are all fantastic ways to boost your mental well-being.
Those are all such great reminders. But for someone who's in a really dark place, even those small steps might feel impossible. What advice would you give to someone who feels lost, alone, and doesn't even know where to turn?
As we've been saying throughout this whole deep dive, asking for help is one of the bravest and most powerful things you can do. So if you're feeling lost and overwhelmed, reach out to someone you trust, a friend, a family member, your doctor, a therapist, anyone you feel comfortable opening up to. Remember, you're not alone. There are people who care about you and want to help you through this. And there are so many incredible resources available online in your community to support you on your journey to healing.
That's such an important message. You are not alone. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of water and the often misunderstood topic of depression.
It's been an incredible journey, that's for sure.
It really has. We learned that water is way more than just a drink. It's the lifeblood of our bodies, impacting everything from how our joints move to how our brains function. And we dove deep into the complexities of depression, separating fact from fiction and shining a light on the incredible power of treatment and support. We explored those powerful connections between our physical and mental health, highlighting how taking care of one has a ripple effect on the other. So, as we go about our day, let's all try to be a little more mindful of our well-being, both inside and out. Drink that water, nourish those minds with positive thoughts, and never ever hesitate to reach out for support when you need it. And with that, this deep dive has come to a close. Until next time, stay curious.